Welcome to a new Team CGC 9.8 video, and today I wanted to revisit my experience buying my Amazing Spider-Man 300 in the CGC 9.8. And looking back on my experience, there are certainly some lessons that, especially now just doing this channel and becoming more educated on the comic book market, I know that I made back then. So not a big deal for me to share them with you, and hopefully you can not make those same mistakes basically. But Amazing Spider-Man 300, is pretty much the key issue from the 80s to have. And this really was sort of, I would say, the big major key, my first big major key that I ended up purchasing. And, I was a little bit naive of how the comic book market worked and how it sort of related to, some of the pop culture events that were going on, because I did kind of purchase this sort of, a little bit after that Venom trailer came out. So certainly, we'll go over a lot of the lessons that, I learned and that I think I've identified now, and, it's not even a big deal too, because, I think these lessons that I learned are pretty easy to implement. So it's not, any big mystery, these lessons, and, I think essentially when I did buy this, being my first mega key, I maybe had 2 or 3 CGC 9.8s at that point. And just starting on my collection, and this was the first high dollar item I purchased. But I'll give you some insight into how I was thinking back then and what I've learned since then. And this video as well, I think the third video on our channel was me discussing buying the Amazing Spider-Man 300 and how I messed up and made some mistakes. So I'll put that video in the link description below, but hopefully we'll kind of cover that too and just revisit that video. And I got 3 sort of main lessons that I think I learned, buying this comic book almost over a year ago now. So we'll go through all those, and I think it'll be really helpful for everyone out there to, kind of look at my situation and learn from me. But just looking at Amazing Spider-Man 300 first, so there's kind of 2 things I would say that make this issue really, really special. The first thing, in the 1980s, as I said, this is almost like the one key issue to get from the 1980s. And mainly the reason for that is because it's the origin and first appearance of Venom. And, Venom has continued to grow in popularity, I would say, in the last, 10 years, and certainly since this issue came out. So, I think definitely this issue passes sort of the iconic first appearance test. For 1980s, it doesn't get any more iconic than Venom. So you get an iconic first appearance, origin and first appearance of Venom in this issue. Obviously the Todd McFarlane cover, which is another reason to love this issue, and so those classic Todd McFarlane elements, the circle, and this cover being cover swiped a million times now. But yeah, so the first reason is you get those first appearances and that tangible reason to own a comic book. Second reason, in the CGC grading, in the CGC 9.8, this issue is really rare. So just checking out kind of the 9.8 ratio on this issue of all graded Amazing Spider-Man 300s, only 6% of them are CGC 9.8s. And anything under 10% in the 1980s is really, really rare. So this being 6%, well under that 10%. This is a really rare book, and for the 80s it's one of the rarest, certainly one of the rarest with an iconic first appearance like Venom. One that comes close is actually, Amazing Spider-Man 301, so the next issue after this issue. Very similar look on the CGC census, about 6% of all graded copies are 9.8s, very similar to this, but with this one having that iconic first appearance, it's a little bit more expensive. Another issue I would think comes to mind is Amazing Spider-Man 238, the first Hobgoblin. That's right around sort of 8% of all graded copies are CGC 9.8s, and that actually has less 9.8s overall as well. Looking on the census here, 953 CGC 9.8s exist for Amazing Spider-Man 300, and Amazing Spider-Man 238, it's 400-ish, I think, so a little bit less, a little bit older book. But for sort of a mid to late 80s book, that's the reason why this book is so expensive, and we'll get into price a little bit, but it's because you got the first origin and first appearance of Venom, And then in the CGC 9.8, it being so rare, that's sort of the second reason why, in general, this book in the CGC 9.8 goes for about $2,000 US. So that is sort of why, this is such a mega key, and that's certainly why I wanted it. I'm a huge Symbiote fan, huge Venom fan, huge Todd McFarlane era Spider-Man fan. So, this is always a book that I, wanted to get, and I knew I wanted to get it when I first started, wanting to invest in comic books. But, a little bit naive, I would say, through the buying process, okay? So, we'll go through that a little bit, because, yes, I did, as I said, I purchased this sort of right as that Venom trailer kind of came out, a little bit after that. So I do kind of boiled it down to 3 lessons on the things I did wrong, I would say. Because, mainly, just to kind of go over the situation really quick, me living in Canada, I wanted to purchase this book within Canada. So, as I sort of realized that I really wanted this book, I was searching in Canada for a couple weeks, and, no CGC 9.8 Amazing Spider-Man 300s at all. So, really searching, wanting this book, and all of a sudden one pops up in Canada. And now at this time, certainly this book was a buy it now or best offer. So I was sending best offers to the seller, and now knowing sort of more of the pricing information better on an Amazing Spider-Man 300, his best offer was quite inflated. It was essentially a full retail price. So generally you see these go on a good deal in an auction for about $2,000, whereas I ended up purchasing mine for a little bit over $2,500, which is, you see a lot of kind of buy it nows for around that $2,500, $2,600 price range. So that's basically what I ended up paying for this comic, and essentially about a $500 overpay. So how can you not make that mistake, basically? So, for me, I kind of justified it in a weird way, because this was the only one in Canada that came up. And, at that time, I did have quite a bit of cash that I had earmarked to invest in comics. So, I was more in my mind space was more, oh, you know what, I can support this Canadian seller, and, it's okay if I overpay, $300 or whatever, if I can just get the issue now. So that was sort of my thinking back then. Certainly a naive, I would say a noob way of thinking when it comes to buying comic books. Because I think the one thing that I really underestimated about comic books is there's always another one that comes along if you're patient. So, I think I was a bit unlucky where I was looking on eBay really hard for about a month. All of a sudden one pops up. I got really excited. That's another mistake I made. I got really emotional about it. And leading to that other mistake where, I felt that, oh, this is probably going to be the only one that pops up this year or something like that, which is not realistic. Even in a rare book like an Amazing Spider-Man 300 and CGC 9.8, you're going to have at least 1 or 2 pop up almost every month that you could get a decent deal on. And, there always is going to be those buy it nows for like $2,600, around that price that I paid for this. There'll always be those on the internet, but if you're patient, usually about 1 or 2 a month comes up on auction. And yeah, so we'll get into sort of my 3 lessons that I think if you kind of avoid them, you can always get a good deal on pretty much any comic that you're buying. So the first mistake I made with this comic is I bought in a hot environment. So basically the Venom trailer came out, the movie was going to come out, a lot of Venom fans kind of coming out of the woodwork, and that, that wasn't the reason why I had got into investing in comics. It was sort of a decision I had made kind of in the year before that, but it just so happened that I'm a huge Venom fan, and when I started to kind of seriously buy my comics, the Venom movie was just coming out. So, when you buy in a hot environment, you're going to have a lot of those buy it now prices that are inflated, because there's going to be more savvy collectors out there trying to get rid of their books for those elevated prices, right? So that's the first mistake I did, was I bought in a hot environment. The next thing I did is I didn't buy it in an auction. I wasn't patient enough. I didn't buy it in an auction. It was a buy it now or best offer. And generally, unless the seller has really priced it where the market is, most of the buy it nows or best offers are going to be inflated prices. It's basically people trying to get rid of their book for 10 or 20% more than what the actual price should be. And a lot of times people are trying to do that when a movie comes out that's related to the book. So yeah, I didn't buy this on a 1-week auction. It was a full retail price kind of sitting there, best offer. My first few offers were maybe $300 or $400 less than I actually paid for it. He wasn't taking any of those offers, and looking back I could totally see that he was one of those more savvy buyers that had purchased this, and the only way he was going to sell it was for like a $2,500, $2,600 price, which is what it ended up selling for. So if you're patient, you can always an auction will always come along for a book like this. And this one being pretty rare, some other books the auctions come along even faster and quicker. So if you're patient, that is definitely going to pay off. And that kind of leads into our third reason why I sort of overpaid for this. And I got emotional. I wasn't patient. I wasn't aware that a book like this wasn't that rare. I thought, oh my god, probably only 1 or 2 pop up a year in Canada, so I better take advantage of this. Whereas that's not realistic. Almost every comic book out there, unless it is certainly like, maybe there's only 10 9.8s out there, whatever it might be, but in this issue 953, if you're patient, there's always going to be a better deal coming down the line, especially if you're thinking of buying like a full priced buy it now auction. So that was my mistake, mixing in with just getting into collecting comics, mixed in with the Venom trailer being so awesome and cool, got really emotional. Wasn't really aware that, I thought this was a lot more rare to be sold than I actually thought it was. Not realizing that if you're just patient, in the next month another ASM 300 and the 9.8 will come up for sure. Because that's been my experience since then. Essentially I purchased this book for about $2,500. Maybe 3-4 months later, literally there was a back-to-back. There was one, and this is in an old case too, an Amazing Spider-Man 300 CGC 9.8, and a new case came up for somebody was trying to get rid of it pretty quick for just under 2,000 American in Canada. So I saw that and I was like, ah, damn, should have waited. That one sold literally a week later. Another one came up in Canada in a new case, pristine looking. Someone was trying to get rid of it for around that $2,000 mark again. So literally, if only I had waited 2 or 3 months, I probably could have bought 2 of these in the new case for about $2,000 US. Instead, I got one in the old case for $2,500. So pretty expensive lesson, and I was thinking sort of like a noob when I first came into it. I think I had a lot of cash earmarked at that time to invest in comics, so I was almost, in a sense, saying, oh, you know what, if I can just get it now and pay an extra $300, that's nothing to me, whatever, that's fine. But I think looking back, it's just better to try to get the best price you can for a book that you want. And again, I think that kind of thinking that I was doing back then sort of was based on me thinking that these were a lot more rare, that not a lot of them popped up every once, in my experience, about once a month, or maybe even more than once a month, one of these will pop up in the US or Canada on auction at a good price. And I've seen them too where they come up where they're buy it nows, but instead of being priced like a full retail price, they put a buy it now at similar to where the last auction ended for a book like this, and they'll be like, yeah, I need to get rid of this, and you can kind of tell that they're trying to get rid of it a little bit quicker in the item description. And I've seen a couple of those come along where maybe you can get $1,900. You can grab one for a nice looking one. So with Amazing Spider-Man 300 and with a lot of comic books, it pays so much to be patient. I know you want to think that these comics are so rare, but if you're buying something from the 80s or 90s, there's always going to be another auction like next month or even next week with some books. So yeah, you shouldn't really get emotional or feel like you have to win a certain auction, which is pretty much what happened with me. Got a little bit unlucky, I think, hunting around for about a month in Canada, not seeing one. And then when one popped up in Canada, I got emotional and jumped on it and overpaid, essentially. So the way you don't do that is be patient. Don't buy in a super hot environment. If there's a Venom movie coming out, probably don't buy Venom or Carnage comics. Even right now, you're sort of in between Venom 1 and Venom 2. I think if you can find some decent deals on Venom and Carnage comics now, and then if you're into kind of flipping books in the short term, once Venom 2 comes out, you can try and sell those comics that you would have bought for 10 or 20% more. I mean, I think that's probably a pretty decent strategy if you're kind of more of a short-term guy. Personally, super long-term investor in comic books for me. I want to at least hold these for like 10, 15 years, maybe a bit longer. But, the overall experience buying this book, I think, is, something I really wanted to share with you guys because it's a really helpful kind of case study on sort of what not to do when you are buying comic books. And certainly if you're in the United States, me being in Canada, I think that's what kind of screwed me over with this issue a little bit. When you're in the United States, there's so many new comics coming on auction, so you can even more so be patient if you're in the United States looking for a comic like this, because next week or next month another auction is going to come up and you'll have a good chance at getting it for a decent price. And yeah, like I said, there's been countless Amazing Spider-Man 300s that have sold for like $2,000, $1,900, $2,100. Meanwhile, me paying a little over $2,500 for this one. So, not the best feeling. Luckily, financially and everything, I'm fine with it. It's okay. It's not like I need that last like $400 or $500. So, and I think that was a little bit of my thinking initially. Even as getting as sort of naive as, I just wanted to support the Canadian seller that's selling these comics, and he's a comic book nerd like me, so here's an extra like $300-400, whatever. That's almost was my thinking back then. Whereas I think if you're a little more strategic, a little more disciplined, and more patient, you'll be able to find any comic book you ever want for that good market price. And certainly you can subscribe to this channel and follow along on our pricing videos, where every Sunday we go on eBay and just look at all the notable sales from some of these books. And yeah, like 2 weeks ago, one of these sold for a little bit under $2,100, a really nice one in a new case. So yeah, even this book, if you want it right now, in a CGC 9.8, I think it's definitely an investment grade book, and obviously going for investment grade prices, but for a lot of those reasons we discussed at the beginning of the video, ASM 300 is like the one key issue from the 80s that you want. So, okay, I think that's going to be it for this video though. I will put the link for the original video we did, which was like the third video on the channel. Just kind of going over the experience too. Maybe I went over some things in that video that I didn't in this video, but yeah, my hope for this video was just to revisit that video, because I think it's it's a really good case study on kind of what not to do when you're buying comics, and I'm totally cool with sharing my experiences with you. I don't really care that I lost money on this, and I've lost money before, I've made money before. Just money doesn't even matter to me, so it doesn't really matter. I'm just really happy that I could share the lessons with you, because probably a lot of people could be helped more by saving some money rather than losing like a couple $100 on such a mega issue. Okay, that'll be it for this video though. I hope you learned some good lessons. If you haven't already, please join the team and subscribe to Team CGC here. And yeah, at this point we're almost 2 months into the channel and doing about 4 or 5 videos a week. So staying busy, and hit that bell so you can get all the notifications for new videos. Because as I said, yeah, I'm kind of doing about 4 or 5, so we're staying busy. But thank you so very much for watching today, and thanks for all your comments and supporting the channel. And I'll see you on the next video.